Well, I want to just talk about what we do when we sing in the churches of Christ and what it means to us and how it helps us. And I'm going to go way back. A long time ago, there used to be in these parts of the country, there were big preachers that would go around and they would be in a week or maybe 2 weeks, they would preach every night in these churches of Christ. And then they would have somebody that would sing. And so my dad was one of the people who they all asked to lead the singing. So I grew up in a family where Daddy led the singing. He preached at those little towns other Sundays, but then when these big preachers would come, he would be leading the singing for them.
All right, Martha, we're gonna try to use this thing. You mind if I tickle your ear?
No, let's hold it up.
We're being broadcast, and I'm in a public visibility here, so I
Okay.
can't do anything untoward.
That's right. Okay.
Let's see if we can get this
Around my ear.
And is that getting better? All right, say test 1, 2, 3 or something.
Test 1, 2, 3.
No,
Is that better?
Let me get a little bit closer here. What do you think?
Is that better? Can you hear now?
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Sorry, Martha.
Oh, that's fine. Well, Daddy would preach in these little churches sometimes. We lived in Pampa, Texas, and up close to Amarillo. But there were lots of little churches of Christ around who didn't have a minister. And Daddy had graduated from a place where they talked about how to preach. And so he would go down there and preach. We'd get up early on Sunday morning, and we'd have to be ready to go by about 7 o'clock, and then we'd drive down to McLean or anywhere it might be. One of the little towns was Mobetti. And one of the things that happened in the panhandle of Texas at some times, and it happened in Mobetti, an Indian tribe came in and wiped out everybody there. So then later they wanted to still be a Mobetti. So you had old Mobetti was what was thrown away, and New Mobetti was the little town they rebuilt. And then we'd go over another time. It would be that one of these great big preachers that was Cogdell was one of them, but there were several of them that were big preachers in the Church of Christ, and they would come and stay a week or two. So Daddy would lead the singing. They wanted lots of singing, lead the singing for that. So we'd go back and forth, and then we could go to the bigger church in Pampa, Texas, if it wasn't somewhere out that needed to be. But we learned a lot of things, and we met a lot of people. And one of these people that I met was Tillett S. Tedley. And Tillett S. Tedley was this tall man. He was taller than Bill Branch, and he could just sing like everything. And he had written a lot of songs. And so he was down at, I had polio, and I'd been down in Plainview at the polio clinic. And then later I was down there, and he had come, Tillett S. Tedley had, because he was staying with these people that I knew that they had found oil on their property. So they had money. They were farmers, and now they didn't have just cattle and sheep and goats and that kind of stuff. They also had oil wells going up and down on their property. So they could take us, and they would have some of these men like Tillett S. Tedley come for a week or maybe 2 weeks, and they would teach people in the churches of Christ about singing. A lot of them didn't even have a songbook then, but they would give them some songbooks, and they would come, and they would sing songs like this. And Tillett S. Tedley's wife when I met her, I had been a freshman at Abilene Christian, and he came to town to talk to these people, and his wife had polio, and so he was very cautious about where he went and how long he stayed, and he'd try to get back to see her. But lots of people would lead the singing. Daddy would lead the singing for him. This big preacher would get up there and preach a lot, and then we'd sing again. And
So did
and then
I mean, let
Yeah,
me
yeah.
just interject here. Because she's told me this story, and I've been fascinated and did a little thing. And two of the songs that are these the two of ones that you picked out that we might sing this morning.
Yeah, Tilidas Toodleys wrote this one. He also wrote some others, some that you'd know very well. But he would stay with this family that I lived with when we were having these singing schools all around Plainview, Amarillo, Texas, all these little towns. And they were, and Daddy preached in a lot of those, but we'd go and we might drive 45 minutes or hour and a half or where we were supposed to be that night, or if it was a meeting that was being held every night for a week or so, that would be different. But Heaven Holds All to Me was a song that he wrote, Tilidas Tedley wrote, and his wife had polio. And he didn't like to be very far from home where she was in East Texas. He'd come for a while and stay with us at one of these singing schools, and then he would encourage all of us in this. You can learn to, you can write a song, you can do it. You listen to the things on the radio, and you have your records, and you know things, and you can learn to sing a song. Just think about something that you've been talking about, and it keeps going over in your mind, and you hear this thing, just a line or two, but you can kind of hum along, and you can learn to do it. So that's how he taught us about some of these songs.
Shall we
And
try to
you,
sing one of
yeah,
a couple of these?
let's sing one of this. Do you have this one? That's Heaven Holds All to Me. He knew that his
It's
What?
called something different in our book.
Yes, there's another title in our book. It's Earth That Holds No Treasure. And I'm sure it's
oh,
both ways in different
is it
editions, I guess. It's number 884.
now mine says 375, so one of those is
Hopefully the words and the tunes are about the same.
okay. So we're going to start singing.
You have wings behind you.
Okay. He can be like my daddy. He can start it and let somebody else lead.
Earth holds no treasures, but perish with using. However precious they be, yet there's a country to which I am going. Heaven holds all to me. Heaven holds all to me. Brighter its glory will be. Joy without measure will be my treasure. Heaven holds all to me. Why should I long for a world with its sorrows, when in that home o'er the sea millions are the wonderful story. Heaven holds all to me. Heaven holds all
to me, to me.
brighter its glory will be. Joy without measure will be my treasure. Heaven holds all to me.
I will tell you that my mother, well, first of all, I'll say he could play the piano, and he didn't mind a bit if when we were care in these people's homes, he might be playing the piano and we were singing along with him. He didn't care. He didn't make a big deal out of it, but we sang a cappella most of the time. And then when we had just not very long ago, after I hadn't seen him for a long time, my mother and dad and my little sister Mary went to see him in Dallas, Texas. And then he died in August of 1987. But we had visited, he had remarried. He had married a woman later in life, and he lived in Dallas. He could sing just still properly as probably. He could sing any part in the world you wanted to sing, and he would tell you, you can sing it too. Just think about it a bit, and hum it a bit, and you can sing it. And then when you get to church, or when you're in your car, or if you're driving on the highway or whatever, you can be worshiping God and helping yourself by singing those songs. So he wrote a lot of them. I can't even tell you how many he wrote.
Well,
And then I'm going to talk about some other people.
why don't we sing? That we had two songs that you picked
Oh.
out
From his,
from Tedley.
Tim,
Ted-
Tillit S. Tedley. How's that for T's and S's?
Number 230, 230 is another song.
Or 540?
Several of you may know that one.
Some of us have
Where they are now.
542.
And the first and last verse on this song. Worthy of praises, Christ our Redeemer, worthy of glory, honor, and power, worthy of all our souls' adoration, worthy art thou, worthy art thou. Worthy of riches, blessings, and honor, worthy of wisdom, glory, and power, worthy of earth and heaven's thanksgiving, worthy art thou, worthy art thou. Lord, may we come before thee with singing, filled with thy spirit, wisdom and power. May we ascribe thee glory and honor. Worthy art thou, worthy art thou. Worthy of riches, blessings, and honor, worthy of wisdom, glory, and power, worthy of earth and heaven's thanksgiving, worthy art thou, worthy art thou.
Okay. He was just a gentleman. He was just the kindest, youngest, big old man that you ever saw. And he would tell us if we were staying in a home with him overnight or through the week or so, because it was down around Plainview and Fort Worth and Dallas and all these places. And so he would sing with all of us. And he'd let if anybody else started humming a song, he'd say, "You can learn it. Just teach it. Just think what you're talking about and what you want to say, and you can praise God, and then you can sing it for us, and we'll all sing it together." So he'd do it over and over, telling us what we could do, and and sometimes there were some of the songs in those song books that got into our churches of Christ, because he would say, we were talking about this, and the people up in Pennsylvania that are Churches of Christ people, and they're talking about that, and you can sing it. Just sing it. And then somebody learned how to write it downtown, write it down on paper, but you can do it.
And Martha, you had said something about him writing lots and lots of songs, and I had looked up a little information.
Uh-huh.
One of those Googles.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it says here that during his lifetime,
Titley S. Tedley.
taught singing schools
Yeah.
for 61 years, composed 130 songs, published 14 songbooks, and served as a full-time evangelist.
Yeah.
So he had his hands full, it sounds like.
And his wife was sick, and she lived for a long time. She died before he did, and he later had married somebody else when my mother and dad and little sister went to see him in Dallas before he died. But I'll tell you some other people about these that I learned some of these songs. Palmer Wheeler was one of the people that was with us sometimes. And I think you have a song. I'm not going in order, am I?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
But if you want to, you can talk about Mr. Bacon.
Okay. Yeah, we can do. Wilkin Bacon was a guy. Texas adjoined a lots of other places, and some of them were good and some were not so good. But Wilkin Bacon was a Choctaw Indian. There were 5 friendly Indian groups that lived very close to us and where my dad preached and where we were down there. And Wilkin Bacon was a Choctaw Indian. And he didn't go to church with us, but he heard us singing, and he decided he wanted to come over and worship with us and sing. So he was a Choctaw Indian. And he then, this Can He Depend on You? Wilkin Bacon could read that song.
Can we sing that one?
So let's sing it.
We'll also sing the first and last verse on this on the handout, the number 333.
Yeah, I got the wrong,
Correct.
but that's okay.
Bacon, can he depend? Is that?
He can depend on you.
Yeah.
Jesus the Savior came down from above, came to bring mercy and love. Crucify him, the mob scornfully cried. So he on Calvary died, while on the cross he. Let's start. Why don't we start all over? I think I didn't get quite right. Who's that? D flat.
Yeah.
Can he depend on you?
Jesus the
Jesus the Savior came down from above, came to bring mercy and love. Crucify him, the mob scornfully cried. So he on Calvary died. While on the cross he prayed, Father, forgive, for they know not what they do. For he has
he come in mercy.
Can he depend on you? Can he depend on you? His blessed will to do. Will you be crowned with the faithful and true? Can he depend on you? Let's sing the first one again. First again.
Bring it down an octave.
Yeah. Well, I was singing. I would sing it.
Jesus the Savior came down from above, came to bring mercy and love. Crucify him, the mob scornfully cried. So he on Calvary died. While on the cross he prayed, Father, forgive,
What
for
they know not what they do. For us he died, that for him we might live. Can he depend on you? Can he depend on you? His blessed will to do. Will you be found with the faithful and true when he depends on you?
He is preparing in
heaven a home for all the faithful and all. Are you preparing to stand by his side, or in that day be denied? Have you told others the story of love, showing them what they should do? These are the precepts that come from above. Can he depend on you? Can he depend on you? His blessed will to do. Will you be crowned with the faithful and true? Can he depend on you?
You know, Martha, I think that we're this is kind of like the singing school.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you
Yeah.
can depend on me to lead that though.
Well, I
Yeah.
can call you Tedley.
It didn't call me Tedley. Well, there was also Stamps Baxter Quartet, and there were a lot of people that were singing in Churches of Christ, and they wanted you to have it, and Wilkin Bacon wanted you to know it, and he was the one that he decided he wanted to sing with us because he heard us singing, and so he came over and asked if he could come with us, and he would come with us, and he was chief, so we all called him Big Chief, and he loved it. He liked to sing. Wilkin Bacon.
How about
And
Mr. Palmer Wheeler?
okay, well, let me tell you one other thing first. He He was a Choctaw Indian, Wilkin Bacon was. And they were a friendly group for us. But there was another group there that were not they were not a friendly, and they would come over into Wheeler, all Panhandle, and kill the people sometimes over in Groover and Wheeler and Fort Worth, up as far as Fort Worth, but not much that far usually. But it was just really different. And Wilkin Bacon was this guy that had wanted to come sing with us, and then he said, I saw a lady that had red hair, and I'm going to marry her. Where is she? What'd you do with her? And we said, well, she's just not here right now, but she'll be here. But he said he didn't know any women with red hair, and he thought that was wonderful. So we all teased him about he wanted a wife with red hair, and he got her, and they lived together a long time. So who else did?
Well, I think we have done, how about Palmer Wheeler?
Oh,
I don't think we've done the,
Oh, Palmer Wheeler.
I think that's our last one to talk about. I've got our lineup right. Wayne, it was, did you have next? I know the Lord will find a way.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
Number 523.
yeah. So if you.
I don't have that one.
Well, I think,
Do I?
let's see if we can find a,
523.
you've got this, and if you want to say anything about Palmer Wheeler,
Oh.
you got some, let me help you here. Thank you.
Palmer Wheeler was a funny guy. He just was. But all of these people would be in the singing schools, and they would sometimes they were a week long, and sometimes they were 2 weeks long, and they would teach this people that were trying to learn to be song leaders in the church, or just any of us that could sing. So.
Well, it might have taken us 2 weeks to learn that last song we just tried.
Oh, but it's fun to sing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when you have those. I know the Lord will find a way. Is this one that we're going to sing?
Would you like to sing that now?
Well,
shall we?
Is there another one we need to sing first, or is that?
That was that was the number. That was the fourth one that you had on the list for singing today.
Okay. Well, let's just sing it. I know the Lord will find the way for me.
And I thought this one would be good if you need prayers or.
And let me just tell you one thing that comes to my mind that we talked about a lot of times in those singing schools. Like Keith was talking about what happened when Christ died. And if we think about the fact that God had created this wonderful world, and then he put Adam and Eve in there, and they did something that was wrong, and God sent them out of the place. And then it went on, and then it's like there are just lots in our songs. We sing about God and about Jesus, but do we really realize that God sent his son the first time and they didn't take care of it? And then he sent him again, sent his son to die on a cross. And we talk about how terrible that is, how terrible it is to think about it for us and for realize that God did do that. He sent him again so we could have something to depend on. We could be saved through Christ. But it was God's gift to us and Christ's gift to us to do that. Because God was going to have a wonderful world, but it wasn't going to have sin in it. And so there had to be somebody that could come and was willing to die on a cross. So lots of things I learned going. Of course, Daddy preached in these churches everywhere. There'd be from maybe 42 people to 4,000 people singing, all over the country they would sing. And they'd come and they'd stay at our house for a while. L.O. Sanderson was one of them. He is one that puts a lot of our songbooks together. And then he had a daughter that was going to Abilene Christian with me, and she could help. And they'd just have all kinds of songs that we sang. And that's what we did a lot of the time. My family, I probably didn't go to the movies but 10 times in my life, from the time I was born till I got married and moved up here. But we sang, and most of the time we sang. If it was a whole bunch of us together, we sang religious songs. Sometimes we sang other kind of things, and the Stamps Baxter Quartet was on the radio, and you'd hear them, and so you'd think, well, if they can sing that, we can sing it. And they'd sing it. And it was fun to sing it. And we had singing songs, song singings all the time. It wasn't just Sunday or Wednesday night. It was lots of times during the week. People would be singing, not just for funerals or weddings or whatever, but they were a way that people learned about the Christ. When where we lived, they said when the Mennonites came, they taught people to read. They wanted them to learn to read the Bible. And when the people like us came, we taught them to sing. Because if you could sing, you could remember it. You could have something in your mind, and it was going through your head in several songs in several days, and so you just sing it. And that, which is the one we need to sing now. Is
523.
Dale, I just want to chime in because I didn't know that he wrote this song, but he wrote "The Wise Man Built His House
up on the sand.
Everybody sang during Vacation Bible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you always did that. That's true. And he would do ring. He'll be doing things all the time. And if somebody else started, I had a friend that was Sharon Cummings, and she lived in Panhandle, Texas, and Dad would go over there and preach, and he was over there, and so she had started singing this song, and he said, well, just go ahead and finish it. And she said, well, she didn't know how to finish it. And he said, well, what are you trying to say? He said, okay, those are the last 3 words we need. And you do that, and we'll put it in the songbook. And he'd do that. So then we'd go somewhere else, and Sharon Cummings' name would be in the songbook. And you think, my goodness, she's the person that I go with all the time. Daddy preached there where she lived. And so, but he loved to sing, and he loved to think about God, and he could help us do it. So
And this is a good one. I thought we would just use as our invitation or song, and or if you need prayer.
Yeah.
We'll sing all 3 verses on this since it's short. And I think in practicing, especially the prior one, I think I was changing the words to "I know the Lord will find a note for me." But this one is much easier to sing. So, but I know the Lord will find a way for me. I know the Lord will find a way for me. If I walk in heaven's light, shun the wrong and do the right. I know the Lord will find a way for me. The Lord has said, go preach the word to all the world. The Lord has said, go preach the word to all the world. If I walk in heaven's light, shun the wrong and do the right, I know the Lord will find a way for me. Won't it be grand to hear him say, well done? Won't it be grand to hear him say, well done? If I walk in heaven's light, shun the wrong and do the right, won't it be grand to hear him say, well done?
One thing I'll tell you about Palmer Wheeler was he had a son whose name was Esker, Esker. I don't know where they got that name. But, well, the kids used to say he didn't have all of his marbles. He really did have problems. He just never did get up to what you could do, but he could sing. And if it was one of these songs that he knew, boy, he was just ringing it up. And we all teased about it. And when I had polio, and I was in a polio clinic in Texas, and I was in a place where I was in a ward with children. I was I was in the 5th grade when that happened. And so we were in this big thing. It was not quite as big as this, but it had two of the big um, iron lungs right across from me. If you walked in and went down the room, there were 18 of us in that hall, in that place, and 2 of them were iron lungs, and they were the 2 right at my feet. And one of the mothers could come and stay with them sometimes. Nobody else got to have any visitors at all when we had the polio. But we could get outside the door. They'd and the nurses would ask us, "Well, we'll just leave the door open, and you just sing." And they would have us sing for all day long and all night long if we would have. But we just did a lot of that singing that way, and it was a really, I guess it was a good thing. Uh, I got to go back, and I was in the 6th grade, and then I went ahead and went through, um, graduated in Pampa, Texas, and went to Abilene Christian then. But it was just a very, very varied grow up thing kind of play, because when we'd go to these people, when Daddy was preaching out there in these towns one time, the people that lived out there, and a lot of them lived out in the country, and they'd want us to go home and have lunch with them and stay in there, and then we'd go back to the night service. So there was this one family of Mexicans, and they wanted us. I knew that they were going to invite us to go out there the next Sunday, and I had been at their house, and it was not very clean. And I told Daddy I didn't want us to go there. I didn't want us to go out there and spend the day with them and eat out, at the we'd eat lunch, and then you'd eat some supper before you went back to church. And I said, I just don't want to do that. Daddy said, yes, you can do that. You can find something on your plate that you can eat. You don't have to eat everything. Just don't say, I don't want it. Just say nothing. Just take some, put some on your plate, and we'll do it. And we did it. We didn't. We never got sick. We didn't. It just it. And I was in the fifth grade, and I was studying all this stuff, and I think this is just not clean. I don't like this, And we would have had a good meal. At some of the people had great big houses and nice things, and they could, the people, the Saunders that I lived with, they'd had oil on their land, and so they had lots of money. They'd their granddaughter uh, could I got to learn their granddaughter the year before they did. So we'd go down to Fort Worth and Dallas, and I could drive the big Cadillac, and we'd get down there somewhere, and we'd stop at these little churches along the way, and somebody would want Daddy to sing something, and somebody else had learned a song, or you'll find some of these songs were found about uh, arose about that. Up from the grave he arose with the mighty for his slows. You just learn those things, and somebody would start singing them. Somebody at Pampa or Amarillo or Skellytown or whatever, and out there, and when that was going on, and that was in the Second World War, and we could be in Pampa and that area, and we could be fairly safe. And they were teaching these young guys to be pilots. And they built a big barracks out there where these young servicemen were going to learn to go to fly. But they didn't have a place for their wives. So here we are, and we're in this town, and there are these women there that their husbands are in the service now, and they're going to learn to to fly. They're going to be killed. Some of them will be. But their wives could come and stay with us. My grandmother and granddad and my two aunts and uncles and my family all had houses where they came and stayed. The good thing about that was they had Hershey bars out there at the base. They would give these guys these Hershey bars, those great big ones, and we loved it. We would just take them home with us every Sunday. They could go with the wives with us on Sunday. The servicemen were out flying around. And then over between Amarillo and Pampa, it was at Amarillo's where they were making the Bell helicopters. So that was a big time thing there. And it was wartime, and it was, you were hearing helicopters all the time. And then they had this other place where they had the little Jeeps, and they were doing things with the Jeeps. And then there was a place out in the country, and it had been just a wheat field. And then all of a sudden, if you were out there, you'd see these little things that stood up above like here's the ground, and here's this little thing like metal thing sticking up there. And you don't know what it is. And then we'd find out we were over by Panhandle, over between Pampa and Panhandle, and where Daddy was preaching. And that was where the bombs were, because they were set so that if the Germans came over toward us, this little thing would come up and the bomb would go out, and we saw things dropping out of the air more than once in my life. We would, that was just what would happen. They'd be close enough to us that over at Pantex, you'd see these things going up. And so then when it was time to go to church, or if it was right after church, sometimes right after church on Sundays, the servicemen that were being trained out there, could come in to where their wives were. And so they could come in these little Jeeps. And my two brothers and I just thought those were the neatest thing ever, because there were these little Jeeps and they'd take us around, you know. There was well, we had it kind of like Wayne and Lisa. We had out from our town, we had farmers and we had people that was doing all kinds of things, you know, that you do on farms and where you growing wheat or cattle or whatever.
Martha, this has been wonderful. You have just given us a nice view of a little history,
Yeah.
singing and Church of Christ and your background, and just awfully nice to just share that. Wayne, we got one closing song of some sort?
Yeah, close.